From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thank you very much, Ollie. Welcome to Tuesday's programme. December the 11th means that it's 2 weeks from today till Christmas Day. Hope you're well. Hope you're in good form.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yes, Faisal has tweeted there a video of Theresa May getting locked into a car as she arrives to meet the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Is that a metaphor, says Faisal? It might well be, Faisal. You can check out any time you like, but you're going nowhere. But you can never leave. Welcome to Tuesday's Richie Allen Show. Missed you yesterday. No worries though. Friday afternoon live show to make up for yesterday. And for the rest of this week, I've got some amazing guests for you, including today, the first time in about 8 months, Max Egan returns to the Richie Allen Show. Spoke with Max earlier today, as the time difference now is pretty difficult to overcome. Round about now, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning where Max is. Recorded him, and it is a fascinating conversation about civilizations and countries that have been liquidated from history. One particular country that Max has been investigating over the last few months. We talk about that. It's amazing. It's real mind-blowing stuff, and I get into that with Max Egan. It's very interesting, very entertaining, and very thought-provoking. And we'll be hearing from Max Egan in around about 30 minutes' time. It is an extended conversation. And in the meantime, I will have a look over the news headlines of the day and give you maybe a different perspective on those news headlines. Righty-o, so I've got a wee touch of hoarseness today. I'm not sick or anything. It isn't any sore throat. It's just I've been on the phone all day. And it doesn't suit me, that. Because it means I'm speaking all day and I like to rest my voice ahead of the show, you see. But I've been speaking to some very interesting people whom I like quite a lot. So the old voice is a bit scratchy this afternoon. But we'll manage. We'll manage. Good evening to Liz Jones. Hi to Ruth. Hi to William. Hi to Andy. Thanks for the tweets. Welcome to the show. Going to be a good one. Think you're going to like what you hear from Max Egan. Whether you agree with it or not, I think you're going to like it. Yeah, so Theresa May has been dashing around Europe like a character in a PlayStation 4, is it? Is that the latest one? In a PlayStation 4 game. Tell you what we'll do. We will park that for a minute to one side. Leave it over there. A little bit of Brexit in a moment. A little bit of Monica on the side. A little bit of Lisa by my side. We'll do all Brexit in a few minutes. Before that, though, I want to talk about racism. Because it's in the news. Thought you were supposed to be different than the news, Richie. Well, of course we're different. I'm interested in what people are talking about and what they're not talking about. So let's talk about racism for a moment. And we're going to talk football. I should have gotten my crowd noise sound effect there, because I never talk about football on this programme, even though it's something I like to watch occasionally. The Manchester City manager, Pep Guardiola, says that racism is everywhere, following the alleged abuse, racial abuse that is, of Raheem Sterling, who plays for Manchester City. Now, Sterling took part in a game for Manchester City at Chelsea in London on Saturday, and there is a police investigation underway into an incident involving Raheem Sterling at that game, which Man City lost 2-0. Pep Guardiola said racism is everywhere. It isn't just in football, he said. It's everywhere. We have to fight to make a better future for everyone, not just in England, but everywhere. I think he was channeling his inner Michael Jackson there from the We Are the World song. You've got to fight to make a better day, just you and me. We are the world. This is serious, so let's not be glib about it, Richie. Chelsea say, well, we're supporting the ongoing police investigation. A man called Colin Wing. He's not Chinese. That's fucking racist, Richie. Colin is not Chinese. With a name like Wing, you might have thought he is, but he isn't. He's a white British man, and he's 60. And he's one of the men under investigation. It looked like he racially abused Raheem Sterling on Saturday. He denies there was a racist connotation. He says, I didn't call him a black, C-U-N-T. I called him a mank, C-U-N-T. That's what he says. He's been suspended, and his name is all over the newspapers. He says, I'm deeply ashamed by my own behaviour. I want to apologise unreservedly to Raheem and hope that Raheem can be a better man than me by accepting it. The implication that if Raheem refuses to accept his apology, that he's not a better man than Mr. Wing. Strange way of putting it. I wouldn't have advised Mr. Wing to put it like that. Says he's ashamed by his own behaviour. I would argue he's ashamed that he was caught. Right? He's more upset, I would argue, I would venture, that he was caught in the act. Chelsea said that evidence of racist behaviour will result in severe sanctions, including bans. Now, Mr. Wing, don't be so despondent. There's a good possibility that Chelsea might send you on an all-expenses-paid trip to Auschwitz. That's what they're doing with alleged racists these days. Right. Do you want to hear the Chelsea manager, Pep Guardiola? He's a Catalan. And he's been very successful in his career thus far. With Barcelona, mostly, and Man City, and a brief period at Bayern Munich. My great-great-great-grandmother could manage Bayern Munich from her grave, so we're not giving him that one. Pep Guardiola, you sexist bastard, Richie. Pep Guardiola, then the City manager, here he is.
He's everywhere. The problem is the racism is in everywhere. The people we focus in football. It's not just in football, unfortunately. If it was just in football, we'll be safe. But the racism is in everywhere. What happened today in immigrants and refugees all around the world, how we treat them. When once in our lives we were refugees, our grandfathers or great-grandfathers and mothers were refugees, how we treat the societies, unfortunately, is in everywhere. That's why you have to fight and every day. I appreciate what Chelsea did. What happened in my club, we should do the same. So we have to fight, but strictly, for the human rights, from everything to make a better society for the future, for everyone. But today we are in danger, but not here in England, in everywhere, absolutely everywhere, in all across the Europe. And the message for the politicians today are really tough about the human rights. And you have to defend, you have to protect our democracy in the best way.
There are people dying. We're saving our own lives. Right, that was Pep Guardiola. Did the guy say mank, C-U-N-T, or black, C-U-N-T? Either way, he's a plonker, right? He's a plonker. If he called Raheem Sterling a black, C-U-N-T, kick him out for a time, suspend him, take his season ticket off him for a while. That's the right thing to do. Not forever, but for a period of time. It's not good enough, is it really? You don't want to be sitting next to a fool like that at a game of football, but often you are stuck with guys like that. Anyway, is it evidence of racism? Let's imagine that he did call him a black, C-U-N-T. Is that racism? I don't know. We'll never know. Calling someone a black, C-U-N-T isn't on its own evidence that the man fundamentally believes that black men and women are inferior to whites, intellectually inferior and morally inferior. Now that's racism. That's proper racism. Someone who would deny to somebody from a different ethnic background the rights they demand for themselves. And such people do exist. I would venture, again, that there are not so many of them these days, but they exist. Screaming at a football match at a brilliantly talented player, a devastatingly effective player, calling him a black cunt. Is it racism? I don't know. Certainly not going to make excuses for Mr. Wing. Some guys go to football, dear listener, and I emphasise some, and they scream abuse for 90 minutes. They vent. They swear and they shout and they scream. It's quite ridiculous, really, but they've always done it. Most of the time the players can hear noise. I've spoken to many professional footballers over the years. I really have. Many of them. Some black, mostly white professional footballers. And I've asked them, do you hear any of that crazy shit that we hear inside the stands on the terrace? Well, there's not so many terraces anymore. And you know what they say? No, you can't really hear much, Richie. It's just noise. You can hear anger and you can hear booing and roaring, but you don't really hear the individual abuse. Doesn't make it right, though, does it, Richie? Never said it does. Just making a point. They've always done it. Football. Whenever it happened, I don't know. Football became a pressure valve. Kind of a place where working men, mostly, would go and vent. Release that valve. All the shit that you have to put up with in this lunatic asylum all week long. You turn up at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, you get pissed. You eat a shit pie, and you go and watch your team. When your team isn't doing well, often you roar abuse at your team, at your manager, and at your chairman or chairwoman. That's what you do. I don't. I'm no saint now. Over the years, I have screamed at television screens and thrown things around like a child when my team hasn't been doing that well. But I've never gone to a ground and sworn abuse at individual players. I've never done that. That's the truth. I've never done that. Look at any live match on television this coming weekend when a team gets a corner. Now, for our listeners who have no interest in football or soccer, when the defending team kicks the ball behind the goal, the attacking team gets a corner. They get to put the ball down in the corner spot and cross the ball into the box. Watch the behaviour of the people behind the goal when an opposition player takes a corner. It's pathetic. The camera focuses on the corner flag and you'll see a few goons screaming at the player, taking the corner, sticking their fingers up at him and miming masturbation. I mean, it's pathetic. I'm not sure it's racism. And it's important to make the distinction, by the way. I'm not going to win any popularity contest with my black listeners, but I don't mind. I don't see racism everywhere. I see tolerance everywhere. In the community I live in and in the city I go out in, I see people oblivious to the race, religion or sexual orientation of perfect strangers. That's what I see. Now, of course, one of my black listeners might say, that's easy for you to see it like that, Richie, you big white bald middle-aged bastard, you. Fair enough. I take that on board as well, but I'm looking out for it. I'm looking for evidence that people behave differently towards those of a different, as I said, race or ethnicity. I don't see any evidence of it. I think there are people trying to divide us on the lines of race, but mainly they're not succeeding. Maybe sometimes they succeed. They're trying very hard to divide us along the lines of race, mostly. Hence, maybe because they're not succeeding, they've created dozens and dozens of other so-called vulnerable groups, minority groups, through gender identity and all the other things, to help speed up the divide and conquer agenda. So again, to repeat, I would argue those who want to divide us along the lines of race have largely not succeeded. Yes, there are some tossers who blame everything on the Muslims or the blacks or the Jews, but they are in a tiny minority. And even within that, it's a tiny minority that vocalise their racism. The tiny minority, or the majority of the tiny minority, keeps it to themselves. We don't see it. At least I don't see it. So the media is all over this today and yesterday. They are united. They tell us that racism is everywhere. It's a cancer. It's getting worse. This is psychological abuse of a population by the media and the government. You and me are being told constantly that we are worthless, useless, thick, backwards fucking racists. And if you tell people enough times that they are worthless, useless, unworthy of public debate, that they must be sent to Coventry, the more you tell people that, the more they will believe it. And that's what the media does. Racism is everywhere. Hatred of the Jews is everywhere. Blacks are being put down everywhere. No, they're not. I see no evidence of it. What's the worst thing about the media banging this narrative down all the time, ramming it down our throats? What's the worst part of that? Well, the worst part of it is the presenters don't challenge it. They don't have the balls or the ovaries to challenge these claims. Here's an example. I've got an example for you. Here's one I made earlier, dear children. There's a woman called Benny Bonsu. Benny is a journalist. She was on Radio 5 Live this morning. She's a black lady and a journalist to talk about the problems faced by black journalists in the UK. Benny said that she had to go overseas because the working environment for black sports journalists isn't tolerable for black sports journalists. And here's Benny speaking on Radio 5 Live today with Rachel Burden, who asks Benny to describe her own experience of working as a sports journalist, a female sports journalist in the UK. Here's Benny.
I think for me, it's been really tough as a woman, as a black woman in sports. It's really strange for me for many years, having over 10 years of experience in sports broadcasting. It's got to the point that I've had to leave the UK to get a job because working here, the environment is not creative for me to be able to feel comfortable to do my job appropriately. So for
when you say the environment, what do you mean by that?
You know, when you get the opportunity to go work for some of these big broadcasting organizations, the environment is not comfortable enough for you to work. You're made to feel like you've been given an opportunity, don't mess up.
But there's more pressure on you as a black journalist.
There's more pressure.
Yeah.
All the time.
And a sense that you have to prove yourself more?
Yeah. You have to prove yourself more. You have to prove why you're there. You have to prove that you're not there because you're the black, you're the black one that has to be there. You know, you're made to feel that you're there because of your ethnicity. You're not there because you're qualified to do the job. And it's hard. It's hard for, diverse journalists to go into these organizations and just do their job. It's really hard.
So that was Benny Bonsu. She's a journalist and a presenter. And she said she was made in national media jobs, national media now, she said she was made to feel like she was only there because of her ethnicity and not because of her ability to do the job. And she wasn't challenged by Rachel Burden at all. I'd have asked her, Benny, how did that manifest? Were people saying things to you? Did somebody directly say, well, you're only here, love, because you're black to make up the numbers? Or is it that you had a chip on your shoulder? Maybe you were one of the only black presenters in that organisation, and maybe you were looking for the sort of strange looks or the sort of hostile behaviour that you were describing. Is that maybe the case? We don't know now because Rachel Burden didn't ask her to describe how it manifested itself. I'd have said, Benny, how did it happen? What was said? I've had to leave the country, she said. Let me tell you something. Presenting football and sports, but football predominantly and sports for Sky Sports and for the BBC. Let me give you a few names. Some very, very good presenters here. Mike Wedderburn. Anybody who watches Sky Sports News will see Mike every morning. He's brilliant. He presents with a woman whose name I can't remember, a white woman who wears glasses. She's really into the horse racing. They've got a great dynamic. Mike's a great presenter. I could mention Eni Aluko. I could mention Alex Scott, who's been brilliant on Sky News. On Sky Sports since she's been brought in to do the Premier League. And I'm going to be honest, When I learned that Alex Scott was going to be presenting Super Sunday on Sky Sports, not because I'm a racist, not because I'm a misogynist, but I said, there you go. Positive discrimination in action. They've taken Alex Scott and they've put her in there to make up the numbers, to virtue signal. I said that to myself back in August. Alex Scott is brilliant. She's been brilliant. And a wonderful addition to that punditry on Sky Sports on Sunday. So you've got Mike, Kenny Aluko, Alex Scott, Chris Kamara, Jermaine Genius, Ian Wright, Jessica Creighton, Robbie Earl, Stan Collymore, Kate Abdo. I could go on and on and on. Black men and women at the very top of sports presenting in the UK are very well represented. And the lady complaining on BBC this morning, whom we just heard from, Benny Bonsu, complaining that she had to leave the UK. Benny has a very lucrative job now working for the NBA. Nice work if you can get it. Something the BBC presenter neglected to mention. Maybe one of the black presenters I mentioned earlier was favoured over Benny Bonsu. Maybe, just maybe. Listen, everybody's got to stop playing the victim. Raheem Sterling's response to that feckin' goon on Saturday, Mr. Wing, his response was magnificent. He laughed in his face. You call me a black C-U-N-T, I'll just laugh in your face. You moron. I'll give you the treatment you deserve. I think things have never been more fair in the media. Because I'm not a black man or a black woman, I don't know what it's like to live as a black man or a black woman, so I stop short. I don't know. I've given a platform for years to black folks to talk about stop and search, to talk about employment discrimination, and I will continue to do so where black men and women come forward and ask to come on the programme. Anytime you want, you can come on. But in the media, stop. Things have never been more fair. In fact, it's been argued that positive discrimination in the media is going a bit too far. I'm not arguing that, by the way. Others have. So Raheem Sterling, by laughing in the face of this fool, showed himself to be above some goon who paid 50 quid to call him a black C-U-N-T. Rise above it. Grow up. If he said it, he gets a ban, move on. Is it evidence of endemic, real racism in society? I would argue that it isn't. But that's just my opinion. I'll go to the tweets because Mwinga has been on to say, and Mwinga is black, and he says, Richie, I think it was racism from Mr. Wing, in my opinion. Thanks for that, Mwinga. I appreciate that. David Cartoon Drunk says, Richie, I'd be scared of even bringing a banana to a football match these days, even if it was just to eat it at half time. Yes, I take that point, but also, didn't somebody throw a banana at a footballer at a match in this country last weekend? I'm pretty sure somebody did as well. That's hardly nice, that, is it? And again, I would endorse the banning of any fool who does that. William tweets, Raheem laughed it off at the time and I would have done the same thing. Any verbal abuse at games is just hot air that's not worth the time of day. And we still have terraces in Scotland, says William there. I appreciate that. Let me know if it's racism, if you think I'm wrong, if you think it is genuine racism, I appreciate that. And I will read those comments out as they come in. Rather than take this guy to Auschwitz, which Chelsea has been offering these packages for football fans they deem to be racist, Danny tweets, Richie, full expenses paid trip to South Africa, including a safari, says Danny. A safari where you just forget to collect them and drive off and leave them to the lions. Yeah. I don't know, folks, you know. I don't know. I'm quite happy to take the slings and arrows, and I'm quite happy for people to say, well, look, you don't know, Richie. It's not something you have to put up with, Richie. And that's absolutely true as well. Let's change course slightly before we hear from Max Egan, and let's talk a little bit of Brexit. Now, as you heard on the news at the top of the hour. Theresa May is holding talks with European leaders. They're not going well. The talks are not going well. She's met with the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. She's met Merkel, the German Chancellor, and she's trying to get some assurances about this Northern Ireland backstop. She wants some guarantees that the UK can leave it whenever the UK chooses to do so. Mrs. Merkel said the Brexit deal could not be renegotiated. It's been a very embarrassing afternoon for Theresa May. That's what she's hearing. A little earlier on, the President of the EU Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, and Guy Verhofstadt said the same thing. The deal doesn't get changed. Have a listen.
The deal we have achieved is the best deal possible. It's the only deal possible. And so we cannot... There is no room whatsoever for renegotiation.
The last 24 hours, what to say about Brexit? That is that we have spiraled again into a new mess. The vote is delayed. Mrs. May is coming back to Brussels again. And I think that with this Parliament we have two messages for her. The first is, whatever the request may be, we will never let down our Irish friends. It's out of question to renegotiate the backstop on Ireland. And secondly, if she is looking in the political declaration for a closer relationship with the European Union, as Manfred Weber has said, to avoid the use of this backstop, there will be no obstacle. There will be no problem to do so.
So it's not going to happen, but that was a wonderful little ending to that by Juncker, wasn't it? Verhofstadt, just reminding Theresa May, if you want even closer union with the European Union, we can arrange that. Nigel Farage, former leader of UKIP, recently left UKIP disgusted over the courting of Tommy the Tit Robinson, of course. Here's Nigel Farage speaking to Sky News earlier.
Yeah, but she's out there, as she said yesterday repeatedly in her common statement, seeking assurances and reassurances about the backstop and our ability to leave it. But everything you've heard today from Verhofstadt, from Juncker, from Tusk, they're all saying that the withdrawal agreement is not up for negotiation. The very best she can get at the summit on Thursday night are a form of words around it that won't be legally binding. So I think we're pretty much stalemated here. And I do wonder, you know, and I know it's been a bit of a joke, the attempt to get 48 letters, but I do wonder, with a government in total paralysis like this, I wouldn't have thought the Tory backbenchers are going to wait much longer.
Now, speaking of the Tory backbenchers and whether they will wait any longer, Sky News' Beth Rigby, about 15 minutes before I came on air, said that her sources were telling her that the 48 letters to the 1922 committee have been reached or have been sent, which will automatically trigger a leadership contest in the Conservative Party. Here's Beth Rigby.
Yes, Kay, I've been making a few calls around the European Research Group of Brexiteer MPs about this confidence vote in the Prime Minister. And my source is now telling me that they're confident that the magic number of 48 has been breached. They think they've got enough letters in. And Sir Graham might be waiting, the chair of the 22 Backbench Committee, for the Prime Minister to return to the UK before he lets her know this. Now, I have to put a big warning on this too, in that we were here about 3 weeks ago when ERG members were confident that they were going to trigger a confidence vote in the Prime Minister. They thought they had the letters in. Steve Baker, one of the organisers of that group, went on the television to say that he thought that the level had been breached. And in the end, people had said they'd put their letters in and they hadn't. So it does come with a big health warning.
Mm-hmm. So the letters might be in and there might be a vote of no confidence in Theresa May, automatically triggered when you've got 48 letters. It means that she can be challenged. That hasn't been confirmed since I've come on air. We'll see. Just before we move on, right? I talked about the genius of associating Tommy Robinson with UKIP. Now, I know some of you don't like that. And I know that some of you like Tommy Robinson, That's all right. I don't mind the fact that you like Tommy. I don't think any less of you. I don't. I just have an opinion about him and where he came from and why he was elevated into the spotlight this year, particularly. But I don't mind. You can like him if you want. But I talk about why associating him with UKIP and with Vote Leave was genius. Genius, because now you've got Vote Leave, UKIP, right? UKIP did more than any other party to get the referendum. Farage, you've got UKIP. Now you've got Robinson in there. Unpalatable to the vast majority of people in this country for very good reasons. Now, as we approach the possibility of a second referendum, Robinson's courting, or UKIP's courting of Robinson, plants an idea in the minds of the public that yes, voting leave really is a bit dirty, isn't it? You're throwing your lot in with a bunch of very unsavoury characters. It's genius, is this. And I talked about this the other day, so I won't labour the point. Listen to retired teacher Liam Conway on Sky News this morning. He's got to be a paddy. Second generation Liam Conway. He was on Sky News this morning, this retired teacher, suggesting Brexit was a racist endeavour. And of course he wasn't challenged one time by the presenter. Have a listen to what he says. No time does she interrupt him.
Well, my reasons were multiple. I mean, I do believe that there are serious economic implications about leaving the EU, and all the indications show that that's the case. I think probably, though, if you really pushed me, my biggest concern was the rise of racism and the impact that leaving the EU will have. I believe that the political drive for leaving the EU is from the far right, and that Brexit is actually a far right project.
Brexit is a far right project. Now, Gillian Joseph, who was interviewing this guy, had to jump in there. Say, where's your evidence that Brexit was a far right project, Mr. Ex-teacher? But she doesn't.
Both the right wing of the Conservative Party and outside of the Conservative Party, with UKIP and also those around Tommy Robinson.
I see. Tommy Robinson is in the public consciousness now, with UKIP and Tommy Robinson. Very interesting, isn't it? With UKIP and Tommy Robinson.
So I was very concerned about migrants, and one of the things that worries me about the debate...
Now, he said he was very concerned about migrants. Don't get excited. He's not going to say that he's concerned about too many migrants seeking employment in this country and thereby affecting the people already in the country and their economic prospects. No, he's not going to say that. He's very worried about the migrants themselves. Have a listen.
Is that there's not enough said about the 3.8 million EU migrants who are living and working in the UK, and the fact that their rights and their living standards and just their general feeling of well-being is threatened.
Holy Jesus. Shall we hear that again, dear listener? Let's hear it.
Their general feeling of well-being is threatened directly by Brexit, and that's why I'm not got any issue. I don't think the EU...
Oh, let's hear it again. Let's just hear this bit of genius again.
UK, and the fact that their rights and their living standards and just their general feeling of well-being is threatened directly by Brexit, and that's why I'm not got any issue.
Here's classic left social democrat, champagne socialist, retired teacher with his house all paid for and a lovely fucking pension. I'm concerned about the rights of 3.8 million migrants living in this country. I'm concerned about their living standards and that they basically should just be left alone. I'm a champagne socialist, you see. I have the luxury of not giving a rat's fucking arse about the millions of English, Irish, Scottish and Welsh people in this country whose rights and whose living standards have gone in the toilet. Don't forget about them. This is the madness of the paradigm that we live in at the moment. When Sky News will present people like that talking about how Brexit is a racist endeavour, and I'm really worried about 3.8 million migrants, and their living standards and their well-being when I couldn't give a shit about Redcar, about Hull, about Bradford, about Glasgow, about Dundee, and the people in those cities and parts of the country who've got nothing, no manufacturing, farming destroyed, fishing destroyed. No, I weep for 3.8 million migrants. These are mad times. These are mad times. Mad times. This is the Richie Allen Show for Tuesday, December the 11th, 2018. I'm Richie Allen, by the way. This is Bruce Springsteen singing Pete Seeger. That will take us to Max Egan, whom you don't want to miss. Fascinating stuff coming up from Max in an extended interview. Got some terrific guests coming up for the rest of the week as well. I'll tell you more about that after we hear from Max. This is Oh Mary, Don't You Weep. Springsteen singing Pete Seeger on the Richie Allen Show. Oh Mary, Don't You Weep. Welcome back to the show. Let's introduce Max Egan then. You'll know by now that I spoke with Max earlier on today, recorded the conversation because of the time difference, of course, and we got into some fascinating things. Now, in advance of Max coming on, I spent, as I always do, a bit of time on his YouTube channel, listening to some recent presentations by himself and one or two interviews that he had done on I suppose several different subjects. Something caught my eye. And that was what caught my eye, I should say, is Max's presentation of research that he discovered through researching other journalists and researchers, research that suggested that a region of Asia, once known as Tartary, which you can find on Wikipedia, if you put Tartary or Tartaria into Wikipedia, you'll get a little map, and you'll get, it's a small page, you'll get a little history of the region of Tartary or Great Tartary, which I had never heard of. And a number of people whom I know today, I was speaking to today, again, people who've studied history and studied geopolitics, I asked them had they ever heard of Tartary or Tartaria or Tartarians, and they said no, never heard a bit about it. Well, Wikipedia will tell you it is a historical region of northern and central Asia, gives you a map and a little bit of information about it and the rulers of it and so on. However, Max Egan has found, with the help of others, it must be said, Max is very generous with his attributing credit to others, that the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, as far back as 1957, were writing in memos, and this was declassified in 1998, this is all true, were recommending that the history of Tartaria be liquidated, that basically the region's history be written completely out of the public consciousness, that we never talk about it again and that we pretend that it never existed. One of the things Max and his friends discovered is that they believe that Tartaria was a much, much bigger place and covered a much larger area of planet Earth than is given credit or than is claimed on Wikipedia, and that there were a lot of things going on in Tartaria, this country, this empire, that would have worried the power brokers or the financial elites of planet Earth. So basically, there is a country or an empire that isn't ancient history, it's recent history, it's late 18th century. Apparently, this empire still existed, but it has been written out of history. What is Tartary or Tartaria? Why don't we know anything about it? That's one of the subjects I get into with Max Egan. We first off start talking about the yellow vests in France, but then we quickly get into Tartary, and we spend pretty much the rest of the programme talking about that. It is fascinating. Here's Max Egan with me earlier today. I'll be reading out your tweets a bit later on. Max Egan speaking not live, but from Australia to me earlier today. Max, it's great to be speaking to you again. It's been ages. It's been longer than it usually is between conversations. You've been travelling around the world, and I know you're back in Oz now at the beginning of the summer there. Great to have you back, mate, really sincerely. How are you? How have things been for you?
Good, brother. It's good to be back on the show. Thanks for asking me on again. Yeah, it's been good. It's good to be home. I've had a few difficulties. Got hacked a couple of weeks ago and lost 6 hard drives worth of data and a lot of bad stuff like that. So I guess I've been pushing the wrong buttons for the establishment, but something got into my machine and deleted all my hard drives, which was very unfortunate. But I've got a lot of stuff backed up. But apart from that, I'm pretty good. Well,
I'm sorry to hear that. Any idea where that might have originated, Max?
No idea. The computer just started going haywire, and I started trying everything to get it working again, and finally ended up going buying another hard drive and reinstalling Windows on a separate hard drive. And then when I reconnected all my old hard drives, I found that they'd all been deleted. That was the problem that I'd had. All my partitions had been deleted, all back to unallocated tables. So, yeah, a bit of a hassle. I don't know where it came from, but it wouldn't surprise me. The shows that I've been putting out recently have been pretty kind of on the edge, sort of really pushing the envelope a little bit. And I think maybe I just disturbed a few people that don't want the information getting out. I mean, this just goes with the territory of what we do, really.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time over the years that you've had that sort of interference either, to be fair. I'm well aware of that. Good that you've had most of the stuff backed up and hopefully with some of your own audience, and I mean, you've got followers and people who read your work and listen to your work around the world. Some of them will, of course, be very skilled at this sort of thing and might be able to put you in a situation where you don't have to put up with those sorts of attacks in the future. I was thinking of, I often think of you because your name comes up quite often during the production of the programme. And I came across a very interesting Frenchman called Christophe Cross-Houplon. Interesting man, middle-aged gentleman, and he travels the world, and he's an artist, and he loves speaking to people, similar to yourself. I think very open-minded, loves to engage people, not those who agree with him all the time, but people who disagree with him. And he's been writing a lot, Max, and a lot of his writing is in French, but he speaks English. So I've had to have a little bit of help with the translation of some of his articles. He blogs, Christophe Cross-Houplon. And I'll tell you something, he was writing about the Yellow Vest protests in France, the Gilets jaunes protests, which have made the news. I've talked a little bit about it on the programme, really just reporting on the same thing the mainstream news is reporting on, that they've protested initially against the fuel increased taxation in France, but it's kind of morphed into something bigger, become a social justice movement. Fascinating to come across this Frenchman, Max, who's asking questions about this movement and its relationship to groups that have relationships to other groups that have relationships to people like George Soros. He reckons, does Christophe Cross-Houplon, that the Yellow Vest protest has all the hallmarks of a colour revolution, the likes of the ones we've seen in the Middle East, manipulated, planned revolutions that are not as genuine as they appear, or maybe they were genuine to begin with, but they've been hijacked. Now, some people will roll their eyes listening to this and think that we're always trying to find a conspiracy somewhere. But I tell you something, Max, and I can't wait to hear your opinion on this. I think Christophe might just have a point. What do you think?
Well, if you could, the colours come into it. Why the yellow vests? Why the need for yellow vests? If people are in solidarity, they're in solidarity. Why do you need the colours? We always see this sort of thing in these planned revolutions. It's unfortunate. I mean, you look at it, like you say, a lot of what they're doing, it seems quite genuine because of the fuel prices and everything that they're dealing with from the government. And they're saying, look, we want revolution. We don't want this king anymore. We want something different. So, that's typical of the French to do that, but then you got to look at what's happening on the side. The amount of violence, shop windows being broken, all this sort of stuff. This is controlled. people that are against the government, there's no reason for them to be destroying businesses in the area and attacking the people all around them. So you get the infiltrators in there to turn it into this big schmozzle to destroy the economy, to bring on the need for more police. I mean, you know, you can see where it's very likely going to lead. You know, these French revolutions, I mean, they're very, very solid, the French. You don't usually mess with the French. If you do, then they shut the place down. They've got a reputation for it. But again, this seems quite different. We don't normally see this type of violence. Normally they just drive all their lorries into Paris and block off Paris and say, well, all business stops until you change it back. That was usually their tactic.
Yeah.
The level of violence indicates, yeah, this is being controlled. And you've got people that are in there probably with genuine intentions. But then you've got the agent provocateurs that are leading it where they want to lead it, and it'll have a political agenda, of course it will.
And the French president has kind of, well, seemingly backed down to this movement. Emmanuel Macron, speaking overnight, he's promised that there will be a rise in the minimum wage and there will be tax concessions made for the worst off in society. He made these promises in a televised address, people saying that his time is up. He's very interesting, of course. You and I have spoken about him before, and for our listeners who don't know, he's effectively a Rothschild banker. And that's the fact. He is a Rothschild banker. It's interesting. My partner, my better half, is French and has been back in France recently. And she finds it funny that when she mentions to French people, because she's lived with me for 15, 16 years outside of France, and she says when she mentions to French people that this guy is a Rothschild banker, they poo-poo the idea, Max. They roll their eyes and they say, stop with the stupid conspiracy theories. But he is a Rothschild. he is a Rothschild banker. You've only got to look at his Wikipedia page if you don't believe it. So it's very interesting who he is, because some people will say, why would any Soros-controlled movement, if the Yellow Vest is being manipulated by people like Soros? And it might not be, because as you said, Max, it seems to be doing some good stuff. Why would they want to depose a Rothschild banker? It's such a mess sometimes, isn't it? You don't know what way to look or what way to think. But he's come out and said, well, you know, we'll back down, we'll increase the minimum wage. So on the face of it, Max, it has succeeded in some way.
In some way, yeah, that's just appeasement, though. Yeah, we'll freeze the tax and we'll raise the minimum wage, but it's just the appeasement. The French people say, no, well, we want you gone. But you've got to look at how it works, you know. If you've got someone like Macron in there, and the people are not paying their taxes, the people are revolting and doing all these things that the government's not being able to milk the people the way the government wants to, or you want them to. If you're at the top and you are puppeteering that government, well, what do you do? If that government isn't controlling the people well enough and you're not getting the payment that you want from the people, what do you do? Do you reprimand the government, or do you reprimand the people? What do? You get rid of the government and you put in a better government which is going to do what you want better. How do you do that? You sow the seeds of dissent in the minds of the people so that they overthrow their government for you and they elect a new puppet who they think is going to lead them to safety. But it's just the new person you put there for them to elect. That's how they do it. That's how you change the regime. You can't just go into a country and say, well, he's not serving the bankers, we're going to create some scandal and remove him. You've got to get the people to think that they are actually changing things for the better themselves. So you organise these revolutions so that you can put your new puppet in place. That's how you do it. I mean, if you're not getting enough taxes from the people, you can't reprimand the government. You've got to get the people to replace the government for you. That's how it's done, and that's how it's always been done. That's exactly what they did with the Arab Spring in Egypt and everywhere. That's how they do it everywhere. I've done it all the time. Time immemorial, it's how they do it.
It's evidence, I suppose, that the system, I know there are so many different names for the system, so many different words that we use to describe it, the hidden hand, the cabal, the Illuminati. But I suppose it's evidence that it always presents the public with opposition to it, doesn't it? I mean, I've learned that over the years. But some of us were very heavily criticised when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party, because on the face of it, we should find common ground with much of what Jeremy Corbyn has said over the years. And why wouldn't we find common ground with some of the things he's had to say about the Israeli occupation of Palestine and the war crimes committed by the United States and Israel and the United Kingdom and all of that. But That's on the face of it. In reality, Jeremy Corbyn is either consciously or unconsciously just another servant of the system, isn't he? I mean, let's be honest about it. There's no getting away from it.
Well, exactly. Of course he is, because the system is the system. It doesn't matter what face you put on the coin. If you're going to go in there and play by those rules, then you're already corrupted, because the system is corrupt. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, but you will become corrupted by simply working within those parameters. And when I say corrupted, like I say, I don't mean bad. It's like if you've got a file on your computer that becomes corrupted, you don't think it's a bad file. It's just dysfunctional. It can't work properly anymore. And if you're working within a corrupt system, how can you do anything that isn't corrupt? It doesn't matter how good you are. You're working within corrupted parameters to begin with. So that's why there's no remedy in the system. The remedy is to reduce the size of government and then realise how much we've been played by all this. I mean, all these governments work together. You've got an international crime family, an international criminal cabal masquerading as government. Who wants to be the enemy this week? Who wants to be the good guy? Who wants to be the bad guy? Let's just keep it going. Keep the war going, keep the destruction going, keep the depopulation going, keep destroying infrastructure, keep destroying old buildings, keep eliminating the past so people can't find out what their real history is. That's what a lot of these wars are about. Like the war in Yemen is about destroying the country, destroying all the infrastructure. The war in Syria is about destroying all the old infrastructure. If they wanted to take out Assad, they could have done that on day one.
Yeah.
They just bombed the country to rubble. That's what they did with Iraq. That's what they did with Libya. They turned it all to rubble. It's what they did with Europe in World War II. They just turned all of the countries to rubble. They turned London to rubble. They turned Germany to rubble. They turned everywhere to rubble because they want to eliminate the past, eliminate the history, eliminate our connection to what we had. And all of these governments work together. There will never be any remedy found for the people of this world through anything any political system has to offer.
Can we stay on this point, because it's really interesting? Let me remind our listeners, they don't need to be reminded that Max Egan is on the line. They know Max is unique, of course. There's nobody sounds like Max in the world, but I'm saying it because it's obviously recorded. Twitter will be hopping right now with tweets from listeners. I can't obviously read them out because Max and I recorded this because of the time difference. My programme starts earlier these days to give me a life and for my health. And one of the problems with that, of course, is we can't speak live. So Max is with me. It's great to have him back on. Let's stay with that theme because I follow your YouTube channel. Of course I do. And I don't patronise you or pay lip service to you. I watch your videos. I watch them all the time. And if you go to YouTube, folks, and you look for The Crow House, Max Egan, it's youtube.com/The Crow House. There is no other The Crow House. It is Max. And the videos and the interviews and the monologues by Max on various subjects there are always fascinating and thought-provoking, even if at times you might think it's a stretch of the imagination. I used to think it was a stretch of the imagination, some of the stuff. And I want to stay with this stolen history, hidden technology, which is a recent video you've put on YouTube. It's brilliant stuff, mate, by the way, and I don't say that lightly. It is really, really interesting stuff. Let's stay with the theme of destroying our hidden history and our history through these wars, the destroying of ancient artifacts, of old museums, not just around the Middle East. We don't often talk about that, and we don't often think about it and how important it is. Let's stay with that. There's an agenda to prevent us, while killing people and offering up blood sacrifices to whatever demons these people, worship or really serve. There's also an agenda to destroy any evidence that might give us an indication or inclination of who we really are, Max. But not only who we really are, who we're really capable of, right? What we're really capable of.
Absolutely, and it's been an ongoing theme. I mean, what I've been delving into lately, speaking of stolen history, is a nation called Tartaria, which existed in Europe, which was a huge, huge nation. It wasn't just in Europe, it was also in the Americas as well. If you look at old maps, you can look at maps from around the 1600s. You look at maps from the 1400s to the 1600s, you can see this nation growing throughout Europe. It was just one part of Europe, and then it was most of Europe and Asia, and then it was Europe and South America and parts of the Philippines, and then it was Europe, Philippines, and all of the Americas. It was all Tartaria. A lot of the old cities, a lot of the old buildings that we've got in our cities, in London, in all of our countries, these were not built by us. These were not built by the settlers. These are the remains of a civilization that was already here, It was only destroyed as recently as the middle of the 1800s is when the civilization was destroyed. And there's remnants of it everywhere, and it's a very, very hard pill for people to swallow, to explain to them that our history is a fabrication. All of it is a fabrication. No one's ever heard of Tartaria, but it did actually exist. And by way of evidence of that, I've got a paper here that was sent to me yesterday as a result of that radio show, the last radio show I did. A paper put out by the CIA in 1999, on the 24th of August 1999, called The National Cultural Development Under Communism. Now, of course, in this paper, the CIA is blaming communism for all the problems. But on this paper, I'd like to read you a little excerpt of this, Richie. On page 10 of this paper, the man, he says here, page 10, page 11 of this paper, and I talk about Khazars, all sorts of stuff, but it says here, let us take the matter of history, which along with religion, language and literature constitute the core of a people's cultural heritage. Here again, the communists have interfered in a shameless manner. For example, on August 9th, 1944, that date, Richie, August 9th, 1944, the Central Committee for the Communist Party sitting in Moscow issued a directive ordering the party's Tatar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria, to liquidate serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tatar history. In other words, Tatar history was to be rewritten. Let us be frank, it was to be falsified in order to eliminate references to Greater Russian aggressions and to hide the fact of the real course of Tatar-Russian relations. This was no isolated case. In every Muslim area within the USSR, historians on orders of the Communist Party have rewritten history to distort the facts so that the Russians appear always in a good light. Needless to say, historians which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed, so that the present and future generation of Muslims are forever denied the chance of learning the true facts of their nation's past. Now, that's just one excerpt of a document. And like I said, they're blaming the Russians. But what they're saying is they rewrote the Tartarian history. And this is in 1944. They're talking about this. And how many people have even heard of Tartaria?
Well, I didn't.
This is a huge nation that covered most of the world, and we don't even know it existed.
This is amazing. Can I just... let's get the Cliff Note version of this from you, the basics from the very beginning. While you're saying this to me, I've been able to drag up that document that you've just read from, the CIA document, and it's quite amazing, really. This is Tartary. I'm on stolenhistory.org, which is a fascinating website. A vast country in the northern parts of Asia, bounded by Siberia on the north and west, called Great Tartary. The Tartars who lie south of Muscovy and Siberia are those of Astrakhan, Circassia and Dagestan, situated northwest of the Caspian Sea. The Kalmuk Tartars, who lie between Siberia and the Caspian Sea, who lie north of Persia and India, and lastly those of Tibet, who lie northwest of China. So this was a great vast region, this. Not a region, a country. It was a country at one stage, bigger than Russia, apparently.
Well, they're telling us it was just a region. That's the thing. They're saying it was just a region, it was attractive land. Yet I can find 3 flags for Tartaria. And here you've got a document saying, well, they decide the Tatar envoy in Parliament in Russia. What's they're doing a Tatar envoy in there if it's not a country? You know, they've lied to us about everything, Richie, absolutely everything. And they've expunged this from history.
And it was sorry to interrupt you, Max. It was once a major world power, which existed as late as the 19th century. So in the as you said, in the 1800s, this allegedly, I'm saying allegedly just to be fair, I don't know, but I'm fascinated. This country, Tartary, was allegedly a major world power in the mid-1800s, in the 19th century, with its own flag, its own government, and its own place on the map, which you said, Max, it was on maps, but now it isn't. It's basically being eroded from history. Why? This is the question. Why did this country called Tartary, why was it erased from history? What was going on there?
Well, it was a huge, huge country. Like, it was a major world power. It was the major world power by the look of things. But what we're finding is that there was free energy in Tartary, in Tartaria. Yeah, the copper top buildings, these churches, all these things around the place, and this sounds pretty outrageous to people, I know, but when you look at it, you look at a crystal radio set made of copper and wire and all of these crystals and all these parts. These are all the components that you find in a church. These things are machines for harvesting energy, like Tesla energy, what we would call Tesla energy. And there's every indication that this is how the society was functioning in the mid-19th century. We had free energy, that we were living in a peaceful world. All of the religions were working together and we're all basically friends with each other. We didn't have war. Everything was fine, and it was fine like that for hundreds of years, and then something happened. The parasites took over, something happened. And when you really look at it, you'll find that a lot of the history of what we believe is English history, the history of Britain, is very likely Tartarian history that's been stolen. Everything's wrong. Everything's changed. I mean, they've moved everything. They've changed all the people. It's a huge, huge rabbit hole to go down. But they've changed the names of all the countries. And another thing they've done is that people don't know about is the foundlings and the orphan trains. You know, in the mid-1800s, between 1860 and 1880, there were hundreds of thousands of children shipped all around the world. Around 200,000 per annum children were shipped from east to west across the United States. All around Europe, there were 435,000 children shipped around Europe in 1 year, around about 1880, 1888, something like that.
That's official. That's true, by the way. I just want to clarify, because my audience will expect me to challenge this. I know this to be true. This is official. Max isn't making this up. This is all recorded. Go ahead, Max.
You can tie this into the if you really look deep into this, Richie, you can tie it into the Irish potato famine. This was about stealing children. The whole thing was about stealing children. And the convicts they were sending all around the world, these were children. They shipped 100,000 children per year to Australia, New Zealand, and Africa. Right. There was there were 1,200 foundling homes in Florence alone in Italy. 2 foundling homes alone got 45,000 children delivered to them in 1 year. Okay, and they were shipping these children out everywhere, and they just took these children out to all these countries, and they taught them whatever history they wanted to teach them. And there's even another guy called Dane Calloway who's been looking into the slave trade in Africa, and he's realised that most of the black people in Africa are actually Native Americans. They weren't brought there from Africa. The whole thing has been concocted. They just put children everywhere and taught them this false history to put everybody against each other, play everybody off against each other with all of this false history. Reverse. If you look at it, if you look at the records, you'll find that the black people were already in Africa, and the slaves were the white children that were brought there from Europe. It's all backwards. Everything's backwards that they've told us.
That will be,
evidence of this in Virginia, where the first slaves arrived. It's quite amazing when you really start looking into this.
I'm going to start. I mean, I haven't seen any of that evidence that white children were brought to Africa to be slaves for native Africans. I'm not saying it isn't.
No, like that. They weren't brought to Africa to be slaves for native Africans, but the Americans, the original Americans, it was a mixed race already. There was the Tartarian culture was already in America, and there were black people, there were Native Americans, there were white people, they were everywhere. But most of this culture was wiped out, and then they repopulated the world with children, and they taught them whatever history they wanted. But there were already black people in Africa, and then the slaves that were brought over were the boatloads of children that were brought there with the settlers to go and repopulate. That's why they were sending 200,000 children per annum across the United States to repopulate San Francisco and stuff, using them as the child labour. You know, Oliver Twist, you know, the chimney sweeps, all the kids that were working in the old days. Why was that? You know?
There are clues. There are a lot of clues in that literature. It's interesting you mentioned Dickens. Not just in the works of Dickens, but other authors of that period as well. Clues as to what life was really like for children. Before we talk more about Tartaria, because this is fascinating stuff, Max. Never know where it's going to go when I speak with you. It's absolutely amazing. What about the slave industry then? What about the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Africans who were taken in chains to the United States? How would that fit into any of that?
Well, was there really hundreds of thousands of Africans taken in chains to the United States? Did that really happen, or were they already there? Were they already there in the United States? Was that just cooked up? You know, if you go to, I think it's Virginia, and you look at the signs, it says when the first slaves arrived in America, there were 20-odd slaves, 20-odd black people, 20-odd Negroes, it says on this sign. But they changed the sign. In 1992, it said one thing. In 1998, it said something else. 2005, they changed it. 2015, they changed it. Now they changed it again. So they're changing the story all the way. But it says there are only 20-odd people that were on a Portuguese ship And when they arrived in America, they were not slaves. So the whole thing's weird. There's a channel by a man called Dane Calloway. I need to look into it more. I've only looked at a couple of his videos, but he's a black man from America, and he's saying, look, most of the blacks in America are Aboriginals. They're American Aboriginals. They're not Africans. You know, this whole thing's been cooked up. And even with the slave trade in Africa, it was the richest of the black leaders, the black landowners in Africa, who were selling their own people into slavery. You know, so, and everybody was slave. There was Indians running slaves. There were the white people running slaves. Everybody was slaves. The whole place was running slaves. It wasn't just white people stealing from Africa. It was all. This has been concocted to put the white people and the black people against each other. It's just divide and conquer mechanism.
Divide and conquer. But our black listeners now will be screaming bloody murder at the radio. They'll be saying, "Well, hang on a second. We've got an abundance of evidence that, you know, slavery had to be abolished." Through obviously the work of Abraham Lincoln, because blacks were kept in bondage on plantations and were subjugated and abused for decades in the United States, more than decades.
Well, there will be records that indicate that, but are the records true? If you really look at it, if you look at the Reformation that happened, and you look at the loss of Tartaria and what was really happening around circa 1850 to 1880 all around the world, I would suggest that even the American Civil War, these were all cover-ups for clean-up operations. The colonisation of Australia was a cover-up for a clean-up operation, and the World War I and World War II were still battles for Tartaria. This has been an ongoing war probably since the 1600s, and it's so difficult to find out what actually happened because they've just changed everything. And little snippets of history, all of this stuff probably happened, but who did it happen to? Which country? Where was it? And which bits have been taken from there and applied to other people? If you look at the works of Ulysses from Greece, he said he went off sailing to a green island west of Greece that he called Syria. The only green island you can find west of Greece is England.
That's right. So you look at Anatoly Fomenko's work. He claims that Moscow is more likely Jerusalem than Jerusalem. So this is what I mean. We don't know. We really don't know. All we've got is this whole mishmash of history that's been given to us. We've got all of these divisive mechanisms that have been put there to play people off against each other. We've got to realise that, you know, we were all slaves. Everybody was slaves. We are slaves, Max. We are. It's not we were. We are. This is massively important what you're saying right now. People need to understand it. You are a slave. We are the only creatures on this planet that must literally beg a fellow member of our species for the right to live. Of course we're slaves. It's a fact. It's ridiculous. But the thing is, my parents, my ancestors were brought to this country as children, and they didn't know what was going on. But you can find records of in the settlers' books, in the first colonisers of Australia's books, of there being white people here when the English arrived. But really, when you look at it, you look at the cities we've got here. These cities were here when the English arrived. There's no way we built these cities. I mean, Captain Cook came here in 1770. Australia wasn't officially colonised until 1778. You go and find photos of Sydney in 1820. Have a look at that city that we got in Sydney in 1820. In 32 years, we built this city. Give me a break. These convicts they brought out here, Richie, they were just mad stonemasons. They had these mad stonemason skills. The first thing they did when the convicts arrived was they went out and digged all these quarries and built all these Roman-style Gothic buildings with all this intricate scroll work and these giant churches and all this stuff that we can't build anymore because they were just so incredibly talented, these convicts, you know. Rubbish. The buildings were already... Let me jump in. Let me just jump quickly in there. This is brilliant stuff. Max Egan is our guest today. Great to have Max back on. It's been too long since he was on the programme. We segued into something that Max was... Because Max is probably wondering, has Richie been watching my YouTube channel? Of course I have. Of course I have. Not to try and catch out my guests or anything like it, but I like to know what my what the researchers I've been following for years are saying. And if you go to the Crow House on YouTube, you'll see this terrific presentation. It's a recent interview with Max, Stolen History, Hidden Technology. And first of all, I'm proud of you for often saying, we don't know, Richie, we're asking questions. That means a lot to me, that. I'm fed up with people telling me that this is the way it is. There's no other way. I know everything. You've never done that, and I appreciate that. I like the fact that ultimately we don't know, but these are the reasons we are suspicious. And this is brilliant stuff. Max is talking about an empire that existed for possibly hundreds of years called Tartary or Tartaria. And he's presented on the show today a genuine CIA document. A genuine CIA document that was created in 1957 and declassified in 1998 that suggests that there was an agenda to liquidate from history any evidence that this massive country, this massive civilization, this country called Tartaria existed. It's fascinating. Why would anybody want to do that? Why would they want you not to know about the hegemony is a good word, Max, because from the research you've been doing, and you've pointed me in the direction of other people through your presentation the other day, it seems that there's a lot of evidence that hegemony, that this was the world's biggest country, a massive civilization, and yet nobody knows anything about it. And the CIA were very interested in writing it out of history. Why? And you talked about them being on a higher level of consciousness maybe than everybody else. They had free energy. It was a more utopian, or it might have been a better way of living or a better way of doing things. Fascinating stuff. And I know listeners are going to be tweeting, which we can't read because we're recording. They'll be talking about destroying Palmyra in Syria and other ancient sites in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya, places that have been destroyed through these wars of aggression. And our listeners will be saying, what has been written out of history through those bombing campaigns? What evidence of more intelligent civilizations, more utopian societies were hidden in Palmyra and these other cities around the Middle East? Amazing stuff, Max, isn't it? It sounds like a very exciting time for you to be researching this stuff.
It is. It's amazing because it's where I started was history. It's what got me started on this quest right back when I was 8 years old, and it's sort of come full circle, and I've gone back to history, and I've missed this point that was right in front of me, like all these buildings right in front of my face. And it's quite exciting for me. I mean, I find this sort of information really exhilarating. I just want to know more once I start looking into it. And what they did, I mean, Tartaria with free energy and the things they had, it's very obvious this is what they were doing. And I was talking about organ music as well, being actually music for your organs, healing music. And you think about how they changed the key of music. Lifted it from, 420 or 432 up to 440 to make it slightly discordant. So that everything we're listening to now is slightly out of sync and slightly discordant with the ambience of the background. You think about music being healing, the work of Royal Raymond Rife, and what we can achieve with sound healings and all the stuff that people do. And you think of what we could have achieved with these organs and the free energy. And something else that I find remarkable that I haven't ever mentioned on air yet is that a lot of the buildings that we're finding pre-1850, some of these huge, incredibly extravagant Tartarian structures, none of them have toilets, which is very strange. You find a 540-room hotel with no toilets in it. So what's going on there?
Yeah, that's a good question, yeah.
were we living on energy? Were we able to find sustenance in this stuff? Was it like the paintings, the Michelangelo paintings, were we just eating grapes and things that we enjoyed the taste of because we enjoyed the taste of them?
Oh, here's one. Like that? Here's one for you. Sorry to interrupt you. Here's one for you on that. The BBC reported on a guy yesterday who's a breatharian. Apparently, he eats nothing. Now, I don't know if this is true. Look, I've got to retain some semblance of skepticism here because I've got to be the devil's advocate. But Max, this guy apparently only has water every now and then and just doesn't eat anything and lives, and he's based in the UK. Do you buy that?
Well, look, quite possibly. I eat probably 3 meals a week. I hardly eat anything. Richie. I don't get hungry most of the time.
Wow.
But you look at, have you ever been to the Berlin Zoo?
No, mate, I haven't, no.
If you go over to Germany, go to the Berlin Zoo and go to the Giraffe House. The Giraffe House is an old Tartarian power station. I'm convinced of it. You look at it, it's a Tartarian building. It's got the copper tops, the spires, but it's still working. It's still operating because when you go there, you feel incredible. You feel absolutely amazing in the Berlin Zoo, especially near the Giraffe House. Just try it. It's a remarkable feeling and it's noticeable. And when you leave, you feel like, wow, you just want to go back there to be in that energy of that place. So I think there's probably something to this, and it's a weird thing. But you look at our bodies, you look at how much we deteriorate because of the stuff that we put in our bodies, the food we're given to. We don't have real food hardly anywhere. We're eating animals, we're eating all of this poison stuff that's just terrible for us. What if we could simply live on etheric energy? I mean, we're made of energy. Why can't we? Why isn't that possible? You know, I've always believed that belief is the enemy of knowledge, but I know that the only thing that is impossible is that which we believe is impossible.
Yeah.
We are only limited by our imagination of what we can create and what this reality could be. And when you think of it as a collective consciousness and a collective projection, a collective reality based on the belief system of the inhabitants, you know, the sky's the limit. You know, we don't believe we can live on air we can't live on air because we don't believe it. You know, it's a matter of what we believe and what we believe we can and can't do. That's the only thing that limits us. The only reason we're slaves is because we believe we can't be free. We believe we can't look after ourselves. We believe we have to do what we're told. All this rubbish. It's a fiction. It's a meme that's been put over our minds to cloud us from reality.
I could kiss you, mate. I could kiss you. I could kiss you because you're right. You can't say on the one hand that we are infinite energy and we download our own reality. You can't say that and then say, oh, it's impossible to live without food. That's ridiculous. That's contradicting what you've already said. And I agree with you. Let me just say, Max, very quickly. This guy who's been all over the news for the last couple of days, and the news organisations tellingly are not mocking the guy, or I should say interestingly, not tellingly. They're not mocking him. They're not saying he's a liar. He's a 38-year-old man. He's only around the corner from me. He's in Birkenhead. He's a breatharian. He gets all these nutrients from the air and sunlight. Says he's never felt hunger. And he meditates in a Hindu way. Goes without food altogether. And occasionally, for his breath, he has the occasional mint that's once in a blue moon. And nobody's disputing this guy. Not his neighbours, not his friends. They're all saying, yeah, that's how he lives. And he's not dead. However, the papers did say that one or two people who have tried to adopt the breatharian lifestyle in recent years did become very ill. And they say one person died. But this guy is doing it, Max, allegedly.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, your body's toxic anyway, and you just think, oh, I'm going to do this. You kind of have to know how to do these things. I think you'd have to be in the right energetic state. But like I said, the only thing that's impossible is that which we believe is impossible. And it's like you were saying earlier, people's propensity to want to be an authority on all of these topics.
Yeah.
Well, Tartaria was this, and I can tell you, well, I can't tell you shit about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just finding out about it myself. You know, and it's a huge challenge for me to be looking at this stuff because I've looked at history my whole life, and here's been this clue right in front of my face that I never even saw. Just these buildings. How the hell did we build these buildings? What are they doing there? What, are they just the buildings the old people did? That's the way they did it back then. But we never asked the question.
How?
You know, so it's hugely challenging for people. It's hugely confrontational. And people have to understand that they don't know. Nobody's an authority on anything. We don't know. All the books that we've got have been falsified. All the originals have been burnt. You know, we always get these books of history or whatever, and it's a copy. It's a copy of the original, and we just made a copy just to be safe. Oh, and then there was a fire, and the original burnt down. We're lucky we had the copy. How come that it's always the originals that burn? And then they're revised, then the library burns again. And then they're revised, the library burnt again. They burn everything. They just changed everything. We cannot go on any of the books we've been given. All we can be certain of is that which exists in living memory. That is the only thing we can truly say we know. And anybody who denies that fact is an idiot. Honestly, they are, because all of the books, you know, people may be really, really well read. I'm really well read. I've got a bookshelf here full of stuff. And I look at it now and I don't trust a word of it because none of it mentions Tartaria. None of it mentions Khazaria. None of it mentions any of this. And I've looked at history books my entire life. I've got encyclopedias, shelves of them. None of them mention any of this, and it's right there in front of our face.
I remember years ago, Max, when just before I went into commercial radio, when I was studying journalism, I worked with a man called Stanley Couch. Stanley was much older. He was a retired journalist. And I'll never forget on day one when he brought in all the daily newspapers and he put them in a pile on a table. And he asked us to read a story from each one. And then he started asking questions that I'd never considered before. He said, who wrote that article? Mary Smith wrote it. Who's Mary Smith? Where does she come from? What was the motivation for writing the article? What does Mary Smith believe? What political affiliations does she have? What does our editor think about these things? All these questions, Max, that led you to a place where you said, well, how could we possibly take at face value what is written in that article without knowing the answers to all those questions? Who is Mary? Who's the editor? Where did Mary go to school? What conditioning was Mary subjected to? What conditions were given to Mary before she wrote the article? And so on, so on, so on. And you've got to apply that logic to every book that's on that bookshelf that you talked about there. Why? Why was it written? Under what pressure? Under what conditions? These are challenging questions for people, Max.
They are. And when it's a history book, well, is it the original history book? Is this what was actually written? Or was it copied and was it revised? If it was revised, why was it revised? Where's the original? What did it say in that? What did they change? It's like the sign that I was talking about in Virginia where the slaves arrived. They've changed it. The sign looks different from 1992. Just subtle words, a few words change, but it changes the meaning, And they've done that with everything. A really interesting thing that I find about the way they manipulate text and change text. Are you aware of dog Latin and the all capitals text and all that sort of stuff? I think we talked about that before. How there's no actual English word that's written in all capitals. All capitals text is dog Latin. It's the base form of text. It's not a real word. You can't write God in all capital letters. It doesn't mean anything. It's not the word God. Okay, so when you look at the Bible, the King James Bible, compare it to something like the Jerusalem Bible, which will tell you the same thing. It's the same words, it's the same text, it's the same story. But you look at the King James Bible, on the front, it's got Holy Bible written in all capitals. So it says nothing on the front. Okay, that word isn't there. Those two words are not there because that word
capitalized,
in all capitals. When you look through the King James Bible, every reference of the Lord or God is in all capitals. So it's been removed. So the King James Bible has effectively removed God from the Bible, removed the Lord from the Bible through grammatical deception. So people who are looking at these books and trusting these books, ask yourself why that was done. When you look at the Jerusalem Bible and it says God and the Lord in just normal letters.
Why would it have been done, Max? So, what would the motivation be there?
Because when you go to the legal system, you go to the court, you swear on the Bible.
Doesn't matter.
You swear on a Bible that isn't a Bible. It doesn't say Holy Bible on the front, and God has been removed from that book. And you're claiming to have based the entire legal system on canon law, ecclesiastic law. Why would they make you swear on a book that's had God removed from it? What are they doing? What are you doing when you're swearing on a book that has had God removed from it? Think about it.
Yeah. And of course, contracts and words and legalese are very important to the guardians of the truth, right? The guardians of these secrets.
Yeah, and you're going to go in there and invoke the power of being a living man, and you're swearing on a book that has had God removed from it, and you think that book is on your side? You look at this deception. It's an incredible deception they put over people. And I'm not a religious person. I'm just trying to point this out to people, how they've changed everything and how they've got us subservient to these books. And even the books that we think are genuine, like the King James Bible, has been adulterated and had the actual meaning of the book removed from it. So these are serious things that people need to consider. We are controlled under so many levels and so many aspects of our lives, and nobody really knows what's going on. I put out a show a couple of months ago called Everything is a Lie. Now, I titled it like that because I thought that'll get a bit of clickbait, that'll get a few people thinking about things. And I basically pointed out in that nobody knows anything. I've been researching this stuff 50, 60 years, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And I'm not stupid. But it's people get on this ego. They think they're an authority on something, and they want to project on other people. They cherry pick information to reinforce their belief.
Yes.
So they find stuff that reinforces what they're saying and their idea, and they put that forth, and then they argue with the other guys, see if they can get to the top of the pile. I'll be the guru that everyone follows and trusts, and look at me, aren't I great? This is no way to find the truth. This is no way to get to the bottom of this. It's no way for us to move forward. People have to admit that they just don't know. We don't know. All the information we've got has been falsified, it's been doctored. All we know is what exists in living memory, and we've got to put all this division and stuff down with each other and just look around us and try to piece this together as best we can.
And be humble, as you've said there, not just to repeat what you've said, but to be humble enough to accept that we're at the starting point of where we just don't know. I was very dogmatic as a younger man, as a young presenter, producer in commercial radio, very self-satisfied with what I knew and what I could do. Thankfully, that didn't last very long. And I realised that, in fact, I don't know very much at all. In fact, I might know less than very much. And that's the journey that we're on, you know. And I'm with you. Listen to everybody and everything. And don't cherry pick information to support your central thinking. If anything shakes your central thinking, just go with that. Don't be arrogant. Don't be upset about it. Don't lose your shit just because a central idea has been rocked to its foundations. Go with it. It's a great place to go. You know, go on the journey, go on the waterfall and say, all right, well, I thought this for years. Now I've seen something that challenges that. Fair enough. Let's go elsewhere. That's why this Tartaria thing, this has rocked me now, to be honest. It really has. You know, as somebody who studied history at third level, this has properly rocked me, this idea that, and you know, Max, this is not ancient history. We're talking about 150 years ago. 200 years ago. It's incredible that this civilization, this massive country, this empire existed, and yet there's evidence that the Central Intelligence Agency, amongst others, don't want us to know about it. Why? We've got to look into that. Why do they not want us to know?
Absolutely, and you know, looking at it, realising that they've rewritten history. I mean, the stuff that we think, the Roman Empire, it was no Roman Empire, it was the Tartarian Empire. You know, all the stuff that we're actually told is Roman actually comes from the Etruscans. We're told we can't even translate Etruscan language, but let anyone who speaks Slavic language can read Etruscan, no problem. They can read it perfectly. You know, oh no, this is untranslatable, we're told. Because if we knew that we could translate Etruscan, you'd find that all the stuff that we attribute to the Romans is actually Etruscan. That's where they stole all that from. You know, so they've created this whole false history. And really, when you look at it, the Battle of Troy, which we're told was 700 AD, was very likely fought contemporaneously with the Battle of Genghis Khan, with the Battle of Napoleon. All of these battles were the wars for Tartaria, and they were all fought in the middle of around about the last millennia. They weren't fought BC, all this stuff. All of this has been pushed back in history to make us think that all of these ruins that are around the world are from hundreds of years ago and thousands of years ago, this ancient culture that it's mysterious and forgotten and we don't know anything about it. No, it's Tartaria, and it existed up until 150 years ago. That's a really bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow.
Well, it will be, won't it? Yeah, I mean, it'll blow people's minds, yeah.
You tell people there's no Roman Empire, they look at you, you've got two heads. They start telling you you're a complete idiot to even make that suggestion.
And by the way, Mike, can I just say this, before you continue, can I just say this? I'm not trying to cover my arse here, I'm not. By listening to this, I'm not saying that I believe that Max is right when he says that the Roman Empire didn't exist. I'm not saying what I'm saying is I'm prepared to hear it, and I'm prepared to look at it, and if the information computes, I'll go with it. So don't think, if you're listening to this, that I'm just going along with Max and letting him get on with it. I've known Max too long. I have too much respect for Max. I'm not saying Max is wrong at all. I don't know that Max is right. I don't know that he's wrong. I find it fascinating, and that's why this program exists. This stuff has to be heard. Has to be heard.
Go and have a look at the writing. Go and have a look at the writings of people like Ptolemy and people like Herodotus, map makers like Herodotus, cartographers, Ortelius and these sort of people. Have a look at the maps and have a look at what they say. There's no mention of Italy being this superpower and Rome being this superpower. Have a look at some of the maps that you'll find from the, like circa, you can find really old maps from like, circa, 1800 and way back, 1400s, 1500s, 1300s, even 1200s. You can find maps of the known world at the time. And certain areas are in certain countries. This is how we can see Tartaria growing. It was all yellow, then this part was yellow too, then this part was yellow too, then you can see it growing over the years. Find me a map where it shows the Roman Empire. Find a map where you've got Rome. This is Rome, this is the country run by Italy. Find me a map where you've even got Italy or Rome written in large letters on the map. You have Tartary written in large letters. You have China in large letters. You'll have whatever in large letters, but you won't ever have Rome or Italy in large letters on any ancient map. Why is that? If Rome was this huge empire that conquered the world with no navy, there was no navy. Rome didn't have a navy, but they managed to conquer the world. That's a great trick. How did they do that? The Romans were just scared of water, but they managed to conquer the known world. Of course they did. And put their architecture all over the world as well. Of course they did with no navy. But find me a map that's got a Roman Empire on it. Find me an ancient map. You won't find one.
You won't find one, no.
That's a good clue as well. Think about it, what we're told. And you can attribute all of this to the Etruscans. And, of course, you'll find Roman coins all along the trade routes, but you'll find other coins as well. You find Etruscan coins, you'll find coins from Persia all along the trade routes. It's no different, So there's no evidence to. The Roman Empire was created to give us the backstory to justify the existence of government in its present form and to push all of this ruins and all this history back 1,000 years into the past. So we think that it's way back then. And they created the Dark Ages, this period in history, 1,000 years when nobody was born,
nobody was doing anything. Yeah.
Nobody did anything for 1,000 years. Yeah, right. In every single country on earth, no one managed to write anything down or record anything or do anything or invent anything. Rubbish. It didn't exist. It was created to put that gap and to push everything back in time.
Do you know, Max? I must mention that there is reference, obviously, to Tartary on Wikipedia, but the reference is that it was a region and that it was vast, but nothing like what the, what you think and others think it might have been. It's a very small Wikipedia page about Tartary, which is divided into sections, but very little. I'd never heard of it, to be honest. Some people say, how could a guy who studied history I've never heard of it, never heard of the region at all until a few days ago.
But there's evidence that very much suggested the Great Wall of China was built by the Tartarians or the Mongolians or possibly even Alexander the Great, not built by China. Nothing that we're told is the way it is. We're told, Tartary, nothing to see here. And there's that CIA document which is telling you they're expunging it from history. And they had a Tatar envoy there with the government. So, if it wasn't a country, it was just a region, what were they doing with an envoy there? What can you find Tartarian flags everywhere? What is all this architecture, which is all around the world, all these old churches, all these old buildings? It's the same. If you go and look at my last radio show, I put a slideshow in that showing the buildings all around the world, in every single country you can think of. The buildings, there's Roman buildings the same as what you've got in the center of London, sitting in Japan, in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in China, everywhere. It's in every single country. This was a worldwide culture. The San Francisco fire in 1906 was very likely to destroy what was probably a major Tartarian city, San Francisco. Have a look at the San Francisco sewer system as well, Richie. It's like a whole underground city. The settlers built that as they did the gold rush out there. Remember the gold rush? California gold rush. Yeah. We'll go there and create San Francisco. While we're creating San Francisco, look, we better build this huge underground stone sewer system for the future city that we're going to have here. Sure, they just did all that when they were out there on the gold rush. No problem. They built all those aquifers, all those big, long aqueducts all across there to supply water for the Indians that they were wiping out. Of course they did. Well, no, all of this was Tartarian. And you can look through the Florida Everglades as well, and you can look through Florida on Google Maps, on Google Earth. You can look through, can even find old canal estates that are overgrown by swamps now on an area that apparently has never been lived in. There was a whole civilization here that we don't know about, Richie, in all of our countries, a worldwide culture. We didn't build all these cities. We inherited them from the people who were here before. And again, as recently as 150 to 200 years ago, this has all happened.
And when you think, Max, when you think about the erasing of it from history, if you accept that it has been erased from history, and let's again, remind our listeners that there is a declassified CIA document, it isn't a joke, that says that any notion of this country must be liquidated. It's there. Max has referenced this, it's there. So if we accept that they wanted to erase the country from history, you've then got to ask why. And you can only conclude that, the safest bet is that something much better, something much more fair, something good was going on there that we shouldn't know about now. You can't imagine there's any other reason to erase it from history. If it was a bad place, if it was tyrannical, if it was a marauding, murdering, conquering empire, I suppose they wouldn't have erased it or tried to erase it from history. So it's got to be something very profound, something very deep, something on another conscious plane maybe, as to why they want to get rid of it from history.
Well, yeah, and especially when you start looking at the concepts of free energy and the stuff that we're discovering that they very likely had. I mean, that's why. The concept of us maybe not even having to eat the way we do now, the concept of us having free wireless energy, free technology, and people living in a peaceful culture, all the religions working together, everyone getting along fine. They don't want that. There's no control in that. Not having to pay to be alive, just living our lives as our artistic expression of creation. This appears to be the way we were living. All those paintings of Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci of humans in paradise, that seems to be the way we were living. So of course they don't want it. And it's quite amazing when you think about it. It's very confrontational, and it's a lot for people to consider. Living in societies that were vastly different to the way we are now, and technology vastly better to what we could now. It's a big pill for people to swallow, but I urge people to look into it, because there is every evidence that this is the way we were living, and the evidence of this country and this culture existing is everywhere. It's absolutely in front of everybody's face if they'll just take the time to look.
Well, all the videos that Max is referencing are on his YouTube channel. So go to youtube.com/The Crow House, all one word. Or just go to YouTube and put The Crow House in. You'll get Max and you'll see these, as I've been watching them over the last few days. It's terrific stuff, fascinating stuff, very interesting. And as Max said, important, coming from a good place of humility. Look, we know that this place existed and that somebody tried to cover it up. Why did they do that? We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left today. Brilliant to have you back on to talk about this. It'll set the cat among the pigeons, no doubt, among some of our listeners. But good. It's good to be challenged. It's good to have to hear things coming from people who have a previous, who have form, and you have form of asking questions, and good questions, and poking into areas that are genuine and relevant. You've got good form, I would say, Max. So this is important. I'm going to spend a lot of time over the Christmas period, where I do have a few days off over Christmas, trying to find out more and more about this stuff, because I think it's absolutely vital that we do. These are mad times in the UK, Max. You'll be aware of that. The European Union, 2 years ago, people voted to leave the European Union. I don't care what people's opinion of it is. I think it's self-evident that it is a fascist superstate, an attempt to create a fascist superstate where a very tiny group of people control the majority of people in Europe. I think that's what these political unions are all about. That's my personal opinion, which I've expressed many times on this programme. Everything but the kitchen sink has been thrown at the people who voted to leave, Max, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen in any way, shape or form. Are you watching this with interest? What do you think?
Yeah, look, it's just another thing to keep the people waiting for something great to happen in the future that isn't going to happen. It's like QAnon with Trump and all this, waiting to the deep state to be arrested. And okay, Brexit, we're going to leave. How long have you been waiting? When was the vote? Like 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
To actually get out. No, now actually we've changed our mind. We can't actually do it now. But in that meantime, no one's been doing anything. No one's been rebelling. No one's been trying to overthrow the system or stand up and say anything, because they've been expecting this great thing to happen on the horizon, which of course isn't going to happen. More theatre for the masses. It just keeps people distracted. All these governments work together, Richie. It's all one big puppet show. It's a crime gang. Think about Tartaria. Put it into the equation. Think about the fact that every single government on earth has hid this past, has hid this reality from us. Nobody knows about the foundling trains. Nobody knows about the orphans. Nobody knows about moving all these children around and taking over this ancient civilization, stealing all their buildings and repopulating the world. Nobody knows about that. No government's talking about it. And you can find these buildings in Iran everywhere as well. You can find them in Iraq. You find them everywhere. All the governments are involved in it. So don't believe a word they're saying. It's all theatre for the masses. It's time to down tools and say, hey, enough is enough. We've figured you out. We're calling it. You guys have got to step down. We're going to do something different now.
That's a brilliant way to leave it for today, Max. Thanks for coming back on. It's in the early evenings there. I thought we might have 1 or 2 bits of interference, because a lot of people are coming online where you are now, finishing work and stuff. But it's been brilliant. We've not had any glitches. Sorry to hear about the technical interference that you've had as well, by the way. Hope that will be put to bed. You'll be able to sort that out in the meantime. I've loved listening to this today, mate. This has been a tonic. Fascinating to listen to this about Tartaria, a hidden empire. An empire that was bigger than Russia, but that certain people don't want you to know about. To find out more about it, go to thecrowhouse.com or just go to youtube.com/thecrowhouse. Max is he is a voracious worker. So he's putting stuff on his website and on his YouTube channel all the time, updating it with videos and information, so check it out. Mate, have a terrific Christmas. I don't know what you do at Christmas. We don't do much. It's just me and Caroline and the dog. We like the fact that we get to spend a bit of time together in peace and quiet, so looking forward to Christmas. You have a different type of Christmas, of course, because you got good weather over there during the Christmas period, even though you did tell me it's been a bit cooler there of late. But I hope you have a fantastic holiday season. Thanks for your time, mate. I'm going to give you the final word and wish you a happy new year, and I hope we'll be speaking very early in the new year. Over to you.
Absolutely, Richie. Thanks for asking me on, brother. And you have a good Christmas too. I'll just be taking it pretty easy here and having a quiet day at home with my friends and family. And yeah, it's just that sort of a thing. But yeah, I'll be out there. I'll be over in Acapulco and speaking at an
with Jeff. Lovely. Yeah, good stuff, Max. And David Icke and loads of other people there in February. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody who's out and about, come and check it out there. And I'll look forward to speaking to you again next year, brother. Take care. Have a great Christmas and great holiday.
Cheers, Max. Yeah, fascinating stuff from Max Egan on the Richie Allen Show this Tuesday, the 11th of December. Back in the room, by the way. We're back live. Enormous reaction to this on Twitter. Several hundred tweets, I think, have come in on this particular subject. Huge interest in it. And I'm going to read a few. Richard Angelis, how you doing, Richard? Nice to hear from you, mate. Richard doesn't buy it. He said, it is fun listening to this, Richie. He says, however, the facts are the facts and time is limited. He did send another tweet earlier, Richard, where he says the Russian interest in limiting people's knowledge of Tartary was because of crimes the Russians committed in the region. Richard doesn't buy the idea that it was a vast and successful empire in the 18th up to the 18th century. Thanks for that, Richard. Appreciate that. Keep those tweets coming in. Like I said, a massive difference of opinion, I think, here. Like I said myself to Max during the conversation, I neither believe nor disbelieve. I'm very open to hearing these stories and these coincidences and, little nuggets of information that have been kept from people in terms of people have been prevented from finding this stuff out. It doesn't mean that Max is right, of course. It doesn't mean he's wrong. And some of our listeners are saying maybe Max is adding 3 and 3 together and he's not getting 6, he's getting 10. Yeah, listen, absolutely. Keep an open mind. We'll have to call these types of segments the X-Files. I'm very fascinated by it because regardless of what you think of what Max said, there is empirical evidence that we know about the falsification of other aspects of history, of human history on this planet. We know this to be true, right? A number of you have been talking about libraries being burned down, ancient artifacts being destroyed all over the world. You're telling me this is a fact. You're absolutely right. 'Tis a fact that great effort has been undertaken by elites through the millennia to bury and suppress knowledge. There's no doubt about that. Faisal tweets, Max has done some great videos in the past. Maybe he had some wonky mushrooms recently, says Faisal. Might be a bit unkind there. Don't think mushrooms has anything to do with it. Even though I'm guessing Faisal is joking there. Like Max said, he doesn't know. It's a new area of research that he's begun looking into. Like I said, there's been hundreds of tweets, right? And if I go down through some of them, massive amount of tweets. Liz tweets, that's the way we would like to live now. She's obviously tweeted that a few minutes ago, and she's referring to the more savoury, the more utopian aspects of what Max was describing. Patricia tweets, of course there are lies in history. The narrative is given, and humans unquestionably believe it. It's happening right now with the Holocaust, says Patricia. Nobody denies that Jews died. The questions are, how many died? And how did they die? But anyone who asks that question says Patricia, is anti-Semitic. Thanks for that, Patricia. I appreciate that. Like I said, to read what other people are tweeting me, go to twitter.com. Where it says search Twitter, just put Richie Allen Show, all one word. Press enter, and you'll see what people are tweeting to me. Like I said, enormous reaction to this. Very interesting stuff, this. Delroy tweets, Richie, history has been not just a little bit, but completely falsified. Not just ancient history, but, as Max suggests, very recent history as well. Look at the Moors in Spain, Shakespeare's Othello, says Delroy there. Thanks for that, Delroy. I really appreciate that. Like I said, a lot of differing opinions on the information presented by Max there today. And if I was to start reading them out, I'll be reading them out all day. Great stuff. Great to have him back on the programme. It's been ages as well. Now, there's going to be a follow-up to that. Mac's YouTube channel, as we mentioned in the conversation there, can be found on YouTube by looking for The Crow House. So it's youtube.com/The Crow House. And he will be putting a follow-up presentation to the information that he's already put out there about Tartary. In a few days' time, by the end of the week, there will be another video where he'll have more information, and maybe he'll be answering some of the questions that you've posed to me today. I'm sure he will. No Shrinking Violet is Max Egan. And a number of you are saying that you don't see how it could be possible that such a vast empire that stretched to the Americas, as Max himself suggested it might have done, how it could have been kept hidden as recently as the 18th century, which would of course be the period 1700 to 1799 or thereabouts. How could it be kept hidden, he says. Many of you are saying. Good questions again. Very good questions again. And like I said, if you want to read more of the comments, go to twitter.com where it says search Twitter, put Richie Allen Show, all one word. Yeah, the old voice is disappearing on me. I'll be alright tomorrow though. Just spent all day on the phone. One of those days, you know. And a couple of times the connection was pretty bad and you're trying to raise your voice to be heard and all the rest of it, you know the way it is. Now, I've got something to tell you about tomorrow's programme. I'm watching you on Twitter sometimes, not all the time, because I don't spend very much time on Twitter, but I am paying attention to you. And nobody asked me... Christ. Nobody... that was an email alert. Nobody asked me to contact Dr. Robert Rowan in California. But I contacted Dr. Robert Rowan in California because a number of you were sharing links to an article about him where he talked about why he's not recommending that his patients be vaccinated. Now, he's a GP, an MD, as they say in the United States. He's a general practitioner and he's got a big clinic, and it seems to be a very successful clinic, and he's talking about something which has seen other doctors be struck off in the past. He's talking about vaccines. So I invited him on the programme and he said he'd come on. So he's going to be on with me tomorrow, first hour tomorrow, that's Wednesday tomorrow, first hour, show at 5 o'clock as usual, and I'll be asking him, why have you dipped your toe into these very turbulent waters? Why are you recommending that people think twice about vaccinations and vaccines? So he's going to be on the programme tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to that. That's Dr. Robert Rowan. And again, I just came across the guy's name from kind of voyeuristically watching you one afternoon when you were tweeting about vaccines and stuff, and I saw this man's name came up. I did a quick search on him, saw that he's a doctor, and thought we'll get him on. And a lot of people are interested in what he has to say. So he'll be among the guests tomorrow on Wednesday's Richie Allen Show. Right. Now, I'm going to put the whole programme on YouTube as usual, on Podomatic as usual, iTunes, Spotify, all the rest of it. But I've already taken the Max Egan segment and I've put it on YouTube so you can share it with other people and ask them what do they think. They might think it's a load of baloney. They might think it's interesting. Anyway, it's out there now. The Max Egan interview will be on YouTube very shortly on its own so that you can just share it, put it on Facebook, put it on Twitter or whatever you want to do. That's it for today's programme. Big thanks to Max again. Go to thecrowhouse.com, go to youtube.com and find Max Egan on YouTube. All the videos are there about Tartaria. Like I said, there's another one coming in a few days' time where maybe he'll be answering some of the questions that he's been asking himself. Questions around evidence, more substantive evidence to support this theory. Going to leave you with some Steve Earle. Relax, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening, and we'll do it all again tomorrow at the same time. Look after yourselves and one another. And it's bye from me. Bye now, speak tomorrow, bye.